Hey there, everyone. I'm going to make this quick. You don't click on Jacob's videos to listen to somebody else talk. And I would otherwise I would not interject if it was not urgent. I am concerned that Jacob was attacked, perhaps by like a cyber criminal that forced him to shoot this video on a fucking Super 8, basically. It's the worst frame rate you've ever seen. I don't know what happened here, but text wasn't going to be enough, so I just need to explain it. I just want to listen to this one. The second thing is, unfortunately, Editor Nick here, hello. My internet speed right now is operating at like 10 megabytes a second, download speed. I was like, okay, well, I'll just put video over Jacob's video, so that way it's like we can kind of work around. I can't even download videos because of how long it's going to take me to do that. This is going to be a weird video. Jacob's been gone for a few weeks. This is how he comes back, by the way. We're making our bed. We're sleeping in it here at Also Rusty Buckets. And let's get to the video.
With the splashy head coaching hire of JJ Redick, as well as middle of the first round pick Dalton Knecht, the Lakers started their offseason in an interesting way, but have since done practically nothing other than re-signing LeBron to a longer-term deal. And a lot of the criticism of this inaction, rather than being placed on the front office, is being directed towards a 19-year-old who really didn't have much control over this situation to begin with. Hello everybody, welcome to Also Rusty Buckets. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already. If you're over on YouTube, go ahead and give the video a like. We are trying to hit 200k subscribers by the end of the year, so that subscription is much appreciated. And if you want to listen to this as an audio experience, it is available over on Spotify, and if you are over there, give us a follow and 5 stars. If you can't tell by the sound of my voice, I am sick. That's the reason there has not been a video for a little bit. I did release a video while on vacation. I was planning on hitting the ground running as soon as I came back, but unfortunately everybody that I was on vacation with got sick. Thought I might have the vid for a second there, but turns out it's just some flu-like symptoms. I'm feeling all right now, but I'm definitely still a little sick, but I'm gonna push through so I can talk about the Los Angeles Lakers. So in this video, I aim to talk about the Lakers season as a whole and really what's coming next for them and the fact that they really didn't achieve anything in this offseason, but I primarily want to focus on what the title of this video is. It's about Bronny James, because this has been what I would describe as a discourse minefield. There have been a lot of stupid things said by a lot of people on multiple ends of the equation. I honestly am baffled by some of the arguments that I have heard, both defending Bronny and going after him. And really, the first thing that I should say that is most important to me to clarify, Bronny James is a 19-year-old who has a lot of people in his ear telling him what he's supposed to do. I don't know if you remember being that age, or maybe you're even younger than that age, and maybe you would like to believe that you have a little bit more autonomy than you do. I sure as hell know that I did when I was 19 years old. That's just kind of the nature of things. When you're young, you're really brash and confident. Let's be real, you're a little bit incorrect, and you're looking at the people around you who have been around for a while to guide you. And if the people who have been around for a while are LeBron James and Rich Paul, and they're telling you you need to do these things, well, then you're going to do them. The thing that I have been most bothered by as it relates to this discourse is the morality of it being blamed on Bronny specifically. And this is all related to the conversation of nepotism. Bronny would not be drafted by any team, probably, if not for the Lakers drafting him. It looked like he was going to go undrafted. The incentive of getting LeBron James potentially didn't seem to stir teams to be all that interested in drafting a player and using a roster spot on someone that they weren't going to otherwise. And this has naturally led to people going, well, this is someone who shouldn't be in the NBA, who is only in the NBA because his father is LeBron James. And I think that is a valid criticism, and we will discuss that. But it's not a valid criticism in the sense of attacking Bronny. It's not a valid reason to be mean to this basically kid, like freshly an adult, been in a very privileged position his entire life, so he's been living in pretty much a bubble. Like, obviously, this kid's just gonna do what his parents tell him to do. So if you want to criticize anybody, it is LeBron James, it is Savannah James, I guess, if you want to get real specific about the family at large, but it's especially Rich Paul, because some Rich Paul shenanigans have been behind this entire situation, And it's just not pretty. Like, he was telling other teams not to draft Bronny, which is probably part of the reason he fell as far as he did. Like, there's a decent chance he would have still got drafted by somebody trying to take that gamble, I guess, now that I'm saying it out loud, which is contradictory to what I said earlier, but I didn't say this out loud before. One way or the other, Bronny James is officially on an NBA roster as a late second-round pick, getting a 4-year contract, which you usually don't get as a second-round pick. Not to mention it not even being a two-way. That's usually what you can expect at this point. Most players who are drafted in the second round don't even actually see a minute of NBA basketball, let alone a guaranteed roster spot. So, you could argue that that opportunity has been robbed from someone out there that could have had that job instead of Bronny. I agree. That's probably the case. Now, what I don't think makes sense as a good defense is, well, it was the 55th overall pick. That player probably wasn't going to play anyways. That might be true, but you never know. That opportunity could have gone to somebody else who could have done something special with it. You just can't say that for sure, and I think it's a little bit of a slippery slope if you're just going, well, this, then that. Like, this job wasn't going to be available, therefore it's okay if we steal it. That's not really the move. I don't think that logic's fair, and I think using it as an argument against this being nepotism is dumb. And I think a lot of people are responding to that with it being dumb, but then those same people are going too far in the opposite direction, where again, they are moralizing it in a way that is specifically critical of Bronny. And I just think that's ludicrous. I do not think he deserves criticism for the situation. His family, Rich Paul, all by all means go for that. Let's talk about him as an actual basketball player, and as well as just what some of this discourse has looked like in general. Because what bothers me the most is that the volatility and the level of vitriol in general is super high volume because of this nepotism situation. That's where I think a lot of the criticism goes LeBron's way, because he has brought this wave of hate onto his son. Now, there are some that have been argued like, is it a bad father move? I'm not going to criticize the man's actions as a father, but I will criticize his actions as a businessman and his actions in terms of like pulling strings behind the scenes for how an NBA franchise operates. From that perspective, someone was going like, hey, he's giving his son millions of dollars. Do you think his son wasn't going to get millions of dollars? Is LeBron James's kid. I don't know if you knew that by the name LeBron James Jr., but it's LeBron's kid. He is a billionaire, or at least close to it. Bronny was gonna be fine financially, so I don't think going like, well, he gave his son all this money, it'll make up for all the criticism or the mental anguish that could come of his career potentially flaming out. That's not a good argument. It's not. But there's a lot of pressure that's coming with this. There's a lot of pressure, especially given the fact that the Lakers had so little actually done in their offseason. The only guys that are joining this roster that were not on it last year, I believe across the board, are just rookies. I don't think there was anybody, unless I missed it, no key rotation player, no key name to be sure. I do believe Dalton Connect can be an actual rotation piece, but one rotation piece after that season, after the last few seasons, they're really banking on JJ Redick just completely saving this entire roster, when I just don't think that he can pull that off. As it relates to his actual basketball though, we're being hypercritical of this guy who is a second round pick for having some inefficient games at guard. Now let me tell you something that's very important about the Summer League that I think is seldom mentioned. If you are a player that isn't great at creating your own shot, the Summer League can be a real bitch for you, because it is essentially just iso ball after iso ball after iso ball. There isn't really a lot of sets. There's a couple of bits of swinging it around the perimeter until you get it to your isolation score, but for the most part, the players on the floor are going to get their buckets one-on-one, and that's just not really what Bronny is going to be good at in the NBA if he is good at it. Don't get me wrong, he's shown some signs of creation, and in his last 2 games, he's played good after playing terrible in his first 2, but he's not supposed to be like the lead ball handler. He's not supposed to be the lead creator. From what I understand about Bronny as a prospect, he is primarily a defensive-minded guy who has some secondary playmaking skills and is a good shooter. That was the main thing about him. A 3-and-D guard who can maybe do a little bit of creating, but if you look at what is required of you from the Summer League from a guard perspective, more often than not, if you're a lead ball handler, you either need to be really efficient or you're going to be getting in a situation where you're putting up shots and you're missing them, and your ugly stats only get uglier as the game goes along. This is also similar for like big men who need to have their shots created for them. Even if they are good offensive players, you know, someone like Victor Wembanyama is not just taking the ball up the court and creating every time. And I remember last year, Victor had like 2 bad summer league, or 1 really bad summer league game, and everybody jumped on him for it. And it's like, yeah, this is just not the context in which this type of player succeeds. I understand that he's so much more talented than everybody else. I'm not comparing Wemby to Bronny James Jr. These circumstances need to be understood that they are not the NBA. This is not the NBA context in which Bronny James will be playing. If Bronny James cracks the rotation, if he is a serious rotation player at any point in his career, it's probably going to be as like a Patrick Beverley type of player, not fucking Allen Iverson. So like, even when he has shown some on-ball creating chops, those things are interesting, but the odds that that is a huge staple of his game is not that significant. There's not a lot of people who believe that's going to be a huge part of his game. Now, I will say this with any 19-year-old is you don't know. You don't know for sure how their games are going to develop. That not knowing can be used in a way that is also annoying, which is that you just act like because this guy's young, anything is possible, therefore we can't criticize whatsoever. But truthfully, we can probably look at Bronny as a prospect and say odds are really strong on-ball defender. That's one thing that was really key, because he had, I believe his first or second game, he had 3 points on like 1 for 8 shooting. And that was the stat that all the Twitter bait, engagement bait pages were posting. You know, here's his points, here's his field goal attempts, went 0 for 5 from 3 or whatever. Not good, to be sure, but he also had 5 assists, 4 rebounds, 3 blocks, and he was like a +8. Like, good numbers besides 4. His shot wasn't dropping, which happens. And when you're watching someone in the Summer League, you're just trying to see what they can potentially bring to the table as an NBA player. And if what Bronny has displayed to this point has been great defense, and in his last game, might be second to last game, he displayed that the off-ball three-point shooting actually looked all right. I believe he hit 2 of them. One of them was a rather huge corner 3 in the last 4-ish minutes of the 4th quarter in a close game. So overall, my point, this is a young player who was put into this position not really of his own volition. I'm sure if he had some heavy pushback and like argued strongly against it, then he wouldn't be in this position. He was probably all for it. However, I don't think it's right to criticize someone who is borderline a child for being stirred in the direction by some of the most powerful influences I could imagine a 19-year-old basketball player having. Not only is he his father, but his father is LeBron fucking James. So pretty hard not to listen to that guy when he tells you what you're supposed to do in your basketball career. And I just, in general, do not like a lot about how we do our basketball discourse. I don't like how we talk about these guys who are essentially kids. Like, they are very early into the development as basketball players. This is their first step in towards anything resembling pro basketball. They're not going to have a 68% true shooting percentage right out of the gate. Sorry, that's how it works. And just because of this nepotism situation with LeBron James Jr. doesn't mean that he has to be Stephen Curry to prove the situation okay. Even if Bronny does end up being very good, if the Lakers only took him because LeBron James wanted him to be there, it's still gonna be nepotism, even if Bronny is good. So it's almost like people are treating the morals of nepotism as like, well, his game will justify it if he plays well enough. And it's like, no, the situation is the situation. At this point, you just have to hope that he can be a good enough basketball player that it doesn't sting, and I don't think it will. But more importantly, I just hope this doesn't end up being a huge embarrassment for LeBron James Jr., and it just ends up being his legacy as this kid that his dad propped him up in the league, and he wasn't ready for it or ever was going to be ready for it. I feel bad for the guy, frankly, which, normally I don't feel bad for a billionaire's son, but y'all guys are really that much of a fucking dick on the internet that I actually feel bad. So much so, people have been such a dick that they've been criticizing the guy for winning a Call of Duty contest. I thought that Skip Bayless was going to criticize him for it, but turns out he was just the one proposing the segment, and then the guys on the panel were actually being somewhat critical. This is another thing that has irked me about basketball discourse, about, especially like throughout the years, about like how hard players work. You can't play basketball every hour you're awake. You can't play games, you can't practice, you can't lift weights, you can't run track, you can't, prepare your body, you can't even just watch film every second of every fucking day. I guess you really could do that last one, but your body needs to recover following that. And if in your downtime you're playing fucking Call of Duty, what does that matter? That has nothing to do with anything. And there are people who, it's a criticism we've seen 1,000 times, but like, oh, why are you playing video games? You should be getting shots up. No, he shouldn't. I guarantee you he got shots up already. That's been the number one thing that's been on my mind, because like, I truly can't imagine a situation here. I can't imagine an outcome where Bronny isn't getting yelled at, despite the fact that he's basically a kid. As far as I'm concerned, if you're 19 years old and you've been living in your parents' house your entire life, you're still a kid. I'm just upset the entire thing exists, because across the board, it's just led to mind-numbingly dumb takes and vitriol towards a 19-year-old kid. With that said, let's talk about the Lakers in general, bringing back essentially the same roster, still the core of D'Angelo Russell, Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, and you have your bench unit. I think Dalton Knecht will be a fine player, and I actually think he'll be pretty impactful out of the gate. From what I've seen from him in the Summer League, every skill that it looked like he would bring to the table, he has. He's been a lights-out three-point shooter. I don't know what his actual percentages are, but I know the highlights that I watched, that thing looked smooth as hell, and it looked like the defense was terrified of him. I didn't watch full games, I'll be honest. Summer League, I kind of hit or miss those. Last year I went to it and saw it in person, so I had a lot to say. This time I was on vacation and then very sick, so I've only really watched some highlights, but Dalton Knecht looks exactly as advertised. Shooter, can attack off the dribble. He's white, so that means he's sneaky athletic. Yeah, just pretty good connector on offense. He can hit the catch and shoots. He can drive off of the catch. Does what you need him to do. Shooters around LeBron. JJ Redick presumably is going to have a system that heavily involves three-point shooting. Wouldn't surprise anybody given who he was as a basketball player, given what he said historically on his podcast. Like, sets for pin downs for jump shooters is like his favorite shit to talk about. Apparently after Dalton Knecht was drafted, he was even immediately drawing up plays for the guy. So I imagine he will play a big role, but otherwise this roster went entirely unchanged. And that was even with LeBron being willing to take a pay cut. And I do think that was a bit of a gamble to be like, let's see if this guy could even do anything if he has the money to do stuff with it. And then he still didn't, which isn't exactly the best look on Rob Pelinka, but this roster is just going to be this roster next year. And I think JJ Redick could potentially be a brilliant head coach. He could also be a disaster. Don't really know at this stage because he's never coached at the professional level. So it's a complete wild card. But even if JJ Redick ends up being like a miracle tier, excellent head coach, like in a strong coach of the year contention right out of the gate territory, is that plus adding a three-point shooter going to turn this roster into a contender? I don't think so. Maybe it could make them a much more entertaining regular season product, a team that you could actually at least start to conceivably believe in. But at the end of the day, if the goal is to get to the promised land, they're still very, very far from that. And in terms of their assets, they're not great. Like, I think Austin Reeves can get you something interesting. I think Rui Hachimura is a good enough role player that teams would be interested in giving you something for him. D'Angelo Russell, honestly, I think his value to the Lakers team will just supersede whatever value you could get from trading him, because you're really not going to get another guy who can produce like he can at that price range. Whoever you got in exchange for him is not going to be able to be an 18-7 guy who shoots 40+% on multiple three-pointers. Even if he doesn't do it in the postseason, you kind of have to hold on to that guy. You also kind of have to hope that maybe JJ can, utilize him as a three-point shooter more effectively in a way that makes it less terrible that this is your backcourt. Defensively, if it's D'Lo and Austin Reeves, you're probably not going to get enough there. You also lost Taurean Prince, who was a rotational guy. Same roster, new coach, rookie who could be cool. It's kind of a disaster. And LeBron came back, obviously. I don't think he ever will leave the Lakers. I think this contract extension is probably proof of that. I don't think he ever really intended and never really indicated that he had a strong interest in leaving the Lakers. I personally would prefer if he would, just because I think it'd be interesting more than anything else to see LeBron on a contender again at this stage in his career. I was actually thinking the other day when Team USA was playing and he had that moment with Bam Adebayo in the locker room. I was like, man, what if LeBron did the return again, this time to Miami? Would be fun for sure. Maybe enough to bolster them to actually be a legitimate, dangerous threat contender. I would say they would be, even if I still wouldn't pick them as the favorite in the East, which shows how damn good Boston is. But what exactly are we doing? What exactly is the game plan? Because LeBron is 40. Anthony Davis, I believe, is already on the other side of 30. If he's not, he's close as hell. Yeah, he's 31. He's going to be 32 at the end of this season. Like, Anthony Davis is not a young player. He has been in the league for quite a while. I still think he'd have a lot of value on the open market if you wanted to move him, but I imagine it just seems like they want to keep bringing this mediocre train to town and not doing anything to change that, which on one hand I kind of understand, because you have the star power and you're the Lakers, therefore people are always going to put butts in seats. But it's also kind of disappointing to see one of the league's most prestigious franchises just accepting mediocrity to this degree, because at this point it's been too many years in a row of failure to act like it's anything short of delusion to believe that this roster can make it work. It can't. It's over. It's not going to make it work unless JJ Redick is a Mount Rushmore tier coach. And look, I don't think the Lakers have had good coaches the last couple of years. Didn't think Darvin Ham was a good coach, and I thought Frank Vogel was a great defensive coach with great defensive personnel. So really, he just made what would have been a really good defense a great one, and that ultimately did matter in 2020. But offense has been their shortcoming the whole time, and I feel like they could have been a good defense with or without a good defensive-minded coach. So I understand why they moved on from Frank Vogel. I just don't think that Darvin Ham was the solution. I think that is pretty abundantly clear at this stage of things. So I don't deny that a coaching change can make a difference for this Lakers roster. But I think it's the difference between losing in the play-in and losing in round 1 or 2 as like the 6th seed. And that's a cool spot to be, I guess. The Western Conference is difficult, so having any place in the playoffs is some degree of impressive. I don't know, if I was a Lakers fan, I wouldn't be happy. I'm actually curious where you guys feel on that, because if there's anything that a franchise can do that bothers me, it's bring the same roster back when they ain't shit. That's what the Chicago Bulls did last year, and it drove me nuts. That's what they did the year before it, and it drove me nuts. But hey, at least that wasn't a team that proved it could win a championship with its 2 core players. And I understand LeBron's not quite as good as he was in 2020, but it's close enough that I still feel very, 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 very confident that if you got a pretty healthy season out of both LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and you surrounded them with excellent role players, as they did in 2020, or at least pretty good role players, then you would have a championship contender. Now, I don't think the 2020 Lakers would beat the best team in the West, or even the second best team in the West, and I damn sure don't think they would beat the 2024 Celtics, but they would be a very competitive team that would be at the top of that conversation, no doubt, and I wouldn't put it past them to be able to win that. And I think the formula was already presented, so it's kind of maddening that they went away from that formula so quickly, and it just fell apart, and they kept, again, accepting this mediocrity. This is disappointing. And I want to see LeBron James contend for the latter years of his career. Like, going, he's a lot of points, real cool, he's 40 and he's doing this. Like, yeah, it's all nice, it's interesting, it's fun. There's novelty to it. But it's a little sad that LeBron is just not a real factor in the landscape of NBA contenders, really, in any capacity. Same goes for Anthony Davis to a degree, but, you know, obviously AD doesn't carry the same baggage that LeBron does, doesn't carry the same status that he does. I don't know. I would be upset if I was a Lakers fan. That's for sure. Dalton Connect's cool. I think JJ Redick gives you something to be excited about because it's new and interesting, but we're probably going to be looking at a 40-ish win team yet again. That's it. Shout out to Nick for editing this video, and goodbye.